Hello, and welcome back everyone. Today we're covering the best weapons to place in your ancient Tableau. All too often I'm asked to help someone sort out theirs, in order to get the most benefit, and I definitely understand, because sometimes visualizing things in your head isn't everybody's strong suit. I'm here with Yuuna today to give you all a better method, and we'll cover all the essentials to know along the way. Welcome Yuuna, and the first question is what determines which 4 weapons are used for the bonuses?
So the game uses the top 4 weapons based on highest gear scores to calculate the maximum bonuses. You can quickly tell if a weapon is part of the top 4 if it has a glowing border around it. The maximum bonus for each stat is calculated by taking the total amount of that stat provided by all 4 weapons, dividing by 4 and rounding down. If we use our own warband as an example, our top weapons are 14,200, 14,100, 14,100, and 13,500, because their scores are higher than the remaining weapons. If we look at just strength, for example, one of the weapons provides 234 strength, the other provides 219. Between all 4 weapons, we get 453 strength in total. If we take this number, divide it by 4, and round down, we get 113, which matches the final maximum bonus for that stat. If you try to do the same for the other stats, intelligence, willpower, vitality, and fortitude, you'll find that they're calculated in the exact same way as well.
Okay, and I understand we don't actually need all 8 weapons in there, so could we potentially pick which 4 we wanted for stat allocation and add in low-level weapons for ancestral powers that we wanted, like say the stun?
Generally, you do want to fit in the strongest weapons possible because they'll give you the highest caps. But you do need to work with your warband to pick weapons that also fit well with each other so you can get an even spread across all the stats. It turns out with how warband bonuses and legendary gear scale over time, it's always possible to keep your warband caps higher than your current personal stats. So you don't need to worry about trade-offs, and you want to set your tableau in a way that unlocks all your stats. And it's funny because when warbands were just released, we thought perhaps warbands might end up getting split by classes, where you have pure int warbands and pure strength warbands. But as it turns out, since it's possible to get all the points, that the best warbands are actually the ones with a mix of both classes. After doing a deeper analysis into warbands, we found a few rules that work well for us when it comes to building a well-balanced tableau. To get a well-balanced tableau, you must have 2 or more weapons covering each stat, 2 or more triple stat weapons, and exactly 2 weapons with int and 2 weapons with strength. Even a godly triple stat without int or strength won't fit properly.
Interesting, so ideally we want 2 weapons to have strength and 2 weapons to have int.
The reason you want to have 2 or more weapons covering each stat is because you'll never be able to get a comfortable amount just using one weapon. A few weeks ago, someone on Reddit posted some data mined info on how legendary stats scale with Paragon levels and hell difficulties. Now let's use this information to consider some scenarios. In the first case, let's see what happens when we use a single weapon to cover a single stat, and let's assume the most favorable situation possible. Right now, Server Paragon is 510 for us, which is Hell 7. Let's assume we're jumping ahead and pre-farming Paragon 600 gear from Hell 8. You get a weapon with the highest possible rolls, which, according to the data leaks, would be a bit less than 430, but let's just round it up. That corresponds to a maximum warband cap of 107 points. If someone's personal warband points are currently around 100, that will give them around 2 or 3 weeks before they start hitting the cap, which is not that much time. And it gets worse because when that happens, the server will still be Hell 7, and you wouldn't even be able to go back to Hell 8 to farm out higher gear because it will still continue dropping Paragon 600s. So when you're relying on one weapon to cover a stat, you'll either be cutting it pretty close, or if the server Paragons just don't line up, it just won't work at all. For comparison, let's see what happens when we now have 2 weapons covering a single stat. And in this case, let's assume the worst case scenario. Same as before, Server Paragon is 510 Hell 7. Suppose we get 2 drops from Hell 7 with the lowest rolls, which is around 240 per stat. That gives us a total of 480 stat points, which translates into 120 points for the cap. Now, if someone has 100 personal points, they won't need to worry about the caps for this stat for another 6 to 7 weeks. And by then, everyone will already be in Hell 8 and farming a new set of weapons. So having at least 2 weapons per stat just makes things very comfortable.
How do triple stat weapons factor in?
So keeping in mind the previous rules, let's think about how the stat coverage between the top 4 weapons might look like. It turns out if all the weapons in the top 4 are double stat, you'll always end up in an awkward situation where 1 or 2 of the stats won't be covered by 2 weapons. The main benefit of triple stat weapons is that they help you distribute points more evenly across all the stats. You need at least 2 triple stat weapons to ensure that every stat can be covered by more than 2 sources. You can still make an even split if you have 3 or 4 triple stat weapons. But to be clear, as long as you have 2 weapons, you're good, because you don't get any advantages from having 3 or 4 triple stats.
Also, for anyone pre-farming, you can slot in higher difficulty weapons, even if you can't equip them on your character yet. If we're placing weapons in the Tableau, and follow the guideline of 2 of each stat, with 2 out of those 4 being triple stat, how much risk do we face of capping out our current bonus? Or is it still more beneficial in most situations to get benefit from all the main stats?
The good news is that if your warband sets things up properly, that usually leaves enough headroom to not worry about things for a few months. In our warband's case, we set things up more than a month ago using pre-farmed Hell 7 gear. Right now we still have about 4 weeks of leeway. We're planning to redo our Tableau once we get some Hell 8 triple stats, and that should put us in a good spot for the next few months again.
Yuuna, thank you so much for the analysis and your time. This information has certainly helped a lot of people who struggle with knowing which weapons to place in their Tableau.
Thanks a lot, Lita, for having me. I hope the information has been useful in making warbands less intimidating and more rewarding for everyone.
Thanks for taking the time to watch, and have a great day.